So if each of you can introduce yourself and tell us more about what you do.
Hi, my name's Ina Frias, and I'm with Chronicle Media. I'm a manager and producer. Chronicle is a fairly new production management firm based out of LA, and I'm kind of working the New York angle. I lived in LA for many years, worked with David O. Russell for many years, director and writer of American Hustle, The Fighter, Silver Linings Playbook, and also with Arnon Milchan, producer of The Revenant, Pretty Woman, like a really prolific producer for many, many years. And now I'm in New York, and I'm managing and producing, and I'm very happy to be here.
My name is Kevin Bhatia. I'm business affairs at UTA. I work in music primarily, comedy as well, and a little bit of video game space now because that's a thing in our lives. And I guess we'll talk about that more, so I'll keep it short.
Gerard Anthony, entertainment attorney. I have my own practice, represent music acts in various different spaces in music, and also I serve as the in-house counsel for Afropunk Music Festival.
I can't follow that, man. You had to say that when Afropunk was going on tomorrow, right? How y'all doing? I'm Rashidi Hendricks. I'm a producer, manager, and CEO of Metallic Entertainment, which is a literary management company and production company. So we primarily rep writers and directors and comedians, and we're also a production company, so we produce TV series and films.
Thank you, everyone. So since you all work on the business side and everyone in the audience is talent, tell me exactly how do you go about working with talent and what are the things that you're looking for in terms of working with talent or representing talent? Yeah, I'll start with you, Ina.
Let's see, you know, it's a lot of different things go into, you know, finding talent. You know, I pretty much find them everywhere. Obviously, I go to festivals, I go to different events, entertainment events. I meet people just through referrals. Having worked in the industry for a long time, I sort of, it sometimes happens just very organically. So it's not like I'm out there kind of like, you know, searching for talent. You know, generally the talent that I look, the production company that we have, Chronicle, is looking to produce material mainly from women of color or, you know, people of color, stories from those types of perspectives. So, you know, we're very aware and very conscious of where we want to find the talent. You know, it's not 100% exclusively that, but, you know, you just kind of know, when you see it, when you meet the person, when they submit their material to you, you know, sort of what they've done and how committed they are to the material, how good, obviously, the material is. So there are so many different factors that go into deciding to represent a person, as well as, you know, finding the talent.
So my job's a little weird because I don't go out and find talent. Talent just comes to me when they don't want to pay real lawyers to negotiate their contracts. So if you think about it, you know, when whatever it is, a musician, comedian, whoever's starting out, you know, they don't really have a lot of money. They're trying to get their business off the ground, their life off the ground. So from the agency side, when the agent brings a deal in, they, you know, negotiate it a little bit, but then it comes to me, and I basically do everything else to the signature line for the talent. And then the best part is when that same person becomes rich and famous, they then go to the other lawyers like Gerard over here and say, you know, I don't really want to pay you anymore because I'm rich and famous and I don't need you and it's tough to, you know, justify this. And then they come back to me. So it's a lot of ups and downs with the clients I work with. So, you know, whether it's a Post Malone, Young Thug, 21 Savage, Guns N' Roses, all the way down to, you know, new people who are bubbling right now like a Dominique Fike or, you know, in the comedy space as well, it runs the gamut. So I just am ready to work with anybody, so.
I would say, does this sound good? That's like a good place to start. Can you sing?
It's gonna be me versus you tonight.
So I think just what is the level of talent and making sure someone's passionate about it. And then another thing I would add that I don't hear a lot too is like a sense of urgency from the talent as well. Having a certain level of stick-to-itiveness because just being on the business side, there's only so far you can go if you're more passionate about that project than the talent themselves. So.
I would say for me, it's really what's your writing voice. You know, I specialize with directors and writers, so if you're a writer, I want to know what your writer's voice is. I want to know how you convey your words, how great is your dialogue, how great is your structure and your scripts. But then, you know, I can say that I've met people many different ways from, you know, attorneys. I've met people from agents that have bought me clients. I mean, truthfully, I was Lena Wife's first manager, and I met her on LinkedIn. I know that sounds crazy, but, like, that's how I met her, you know, when she was a writing assistant. And so, you know, I think there's really no design to get to a person like us, but I think it starts with your skills. You know, if you're a really great director, if you've been in the festivals and you've done a short or you've done a feature and you have another project, I tend to look at clients that I can actually do something for you, because there has to be something for me to manage. So for me, it's more or less like, what do you have so far? Because if you just come to me with a script, then it's like, okay, well, what else have you done? So I tend to look at what work that person has done before I kind of take them on as a client. And, you know, just so that we can help move the project along.
And this one is for Kevin and Rashidi. Can you tell us the difference between an agent and a manager?
You want to go first?
Who?
Either one, fight for it. Duke it out.
You know, I like to say a manager, I use football and sports analogy, so like I say if the client is the quarterback, the manager is the head coach. That's a way to kind of think of it. We're the people that help direct you and give you the direction how to be your best. And I think what managers do that's different than agents is we kind of build the roadmap for clients. So we kind of say, okay, your job is to write, but my job is to help you get to your goal. So you might, your first year, direct, you know, an episode of Criminal Minds, but you may want to get to having a first look deal at a network, and I can help you get to that path. Whereas agents, I would say, are probably really primarily concerned with booking. They're interested in your career, but they're really more interested in booking. And you can't really be mad at them because the way that agents get paid is very different than the way that we get paid. So they have a little bit more pressure to deliver, and you know they have a lot more responsibility. A manager may have 20 to 30 clients, where one agent might have 100 clients. So that's kind of the difference, I guess I could say.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. But I think, you know, a manager is more concerned about the individual client, whereas an agent is booking, right? That's why you'll see, you know, a client that is well represented, like a Will Ferrell or somebody, he'll have an army of agents. Well, why? Because each agent does one thing over and over and over again, for the most part. But then at the same time, you know, the industry is changing. So right now I'm working on a festival for her, the artist her, in California. And, you know, that festival is basically being built from the ground up. Of course, management is heavily involved, and they are the quarterback, so to speak. But the agency is taking a real active approach and a holistic solution for what this artist is looking for. So it's not just, okay, you're putting on this show and you want a bunch of, you know, co-headliners or support acts, but how can we really bring your idea to life? And in today's world, I'm sure you guys see in any, you know, Lollapalooza to anything else, it's the musicians now, but then you'll have comedians there, then you'll have somebody streaming video games, somebody's making a shoe over there, somebody's cooking a steak over there, and it's like, well, what am I paying for, right? I'm just here to see all this crazy stuff. But the reality is that stuff is so bifurcated now that is where an agency can come in and really provide a whole package, because it's one phone call to call the talent department, one phone call to call the comedy department to get various factors in to give an artist something that, not disparaging management, but like it might not be as easy for a manager to get off the ground as an agent or in a big agency could.
And I like to add, because you guys asked, that agencies, I mean, it depends. I feel like you're coming from a unique perspective, Kevin, because you work for a really large agency, and there are tons of agencies. And I think one of the key differences between a manager and an agency is that agents are highly specialized. So as they both mentioned, their job is to procure employment. That's their job. And they work in specific aspects of your career. So there's an agent for lit. There's an agent for commercials. There's an agent for film and TV. There's an agent for touring. Apparently now there's one for gaming. I can go
Sure
on
is.
and on and on. So that's another difference between the two. And I'm a manager, and we're great. We're very important. We're the most important part of the team, for sure. I'm not biased.
I'm with you there.
Thank you. So the purpose of this event is to provide perspectives for talent of color and also give you perspective for representatives and the people on the business sides of color. So can you guys tell me, you got to turn off those phones. Can you guys tell me if the rules are different for people of color versus people who
Are
don't
not
have
colored?
color?
It's either one or the other.
Are they different? The rules. Meaning, are there things that you think talent of color need to keep in consideration as they're navigating the business sides of their career?
I mean, the one thing that I'll say is, from my perspective, what I've seen is, we were just talking about this backstage, which is, you know, whether agencies now are cynical or genuine is a separate conversation. But the fact of the matter is that agencies are paying attention now more than ever. And what used to happen is that, you know, again, same agent doing the same thing for 30 years, they end up with, whether they realize it or not, sort of looking for the same type of, okay, Jennifer Aniston, great, who's the next Jennifer Aniston? Now who's the next Jennifer Aniston, right? Whereas now, minorities and, you know, especially females are being looked at more than ever. So I think it's great that that's happening, but that also means that for anybody out there who's trying to get people's attention, I think it's easier now to sort of be who you are and keep your original voice when you're talking to these people, because they are paying attention. Now it's not, give me a 30-second elevator pitch that reminds me of 10 other shows that don't represent you but still make it work. Now it's, they are listening more genuinely. And you know, it goes a long way that you being out there and explaining your story, people now are more cognizant of the fact that they need to be aware of who's out there and who should be represented. So there is a shift happening. It's not as fast as I would like, but it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely much more of an interest in hearing different stories, you know, and so that's a great thing. I mean, I think, you know, you can never shy away from whether, like, your own just organic talent, and you know, you're being good at what you do and you're being prepared and just, you know, getting yourself out there. And it's always going to have its challenges one way or another. But I think the great thing that's happening right now is there are so many different ways to present your product in so many different channels and networks and streaming, and, you know, there's so much opportunity, and the chance to really you know, tell different stories. Like there's a hunger now to hear really dynamic and unique stories, and so it's, you know, it's a great time.
I would also add to valuing relationships, because the industry gets so small, and regardless of whatever point you're at in your career, whoever you're dealing with on the other side of that deal or opportunity, you may see them again in a different capacity. So I think too, and that really goes for all talent. It just gets so small, and even in the festival space, working with a lot of agents, a lot of times is having to pick up a phone. Everything is not limited to just the four corners of a contract. So being able to pick up a phone and know that you have a strong relationship with the person on the other side to be able to do what's best in the best interest of the client, of your client, is going to push you even further than someone that's maybe they start feeling themselves once they, you know, kind of start buzzing a little bit more, and they just, you know, piss off all their relationships, stuff like that. So I think being able to value those, because eventually at some point, like, you're going to cool off, and you're going to need some of those other people that you're dealing with.
Yeah. Hello. So, sorry. Yeah, I mean, look, I think writers of color and directors and just creatives of color will always have a different journey, you know, in this industry. I do feel like we were saying earlier, is that there's a lot more buyers now, and with that, just that alone has basically changed the game. I mean, there's so many places to sell projects where, you know, traditionally you had to go to the cable and the broadcast networks, and that was really it. So now it's really a great opportunity to kind of get in, you know, a lot of these digital places like Disney Plus and HBO Max and BET Plus. Everybody's got a plus, you know. So it's like, you know, there is a place that matches your voice. You know, there's even a place called Urban Flix. Have any of y'all ever heard of that before? You know, like that's a new streaming network for voices of color that's like a Netflix, and they're paying budgets that are not like Netflix, but they're budgets that will help you get your project done. So I think it's just, you know, looking outside of the normal box and saying, okay, you know what, I have a great project that can fit 10 different places. Because let me tell you, a long time ago, it really was like 5 or 6 places that you could take a project, you know? And then, you know, obviously with the expansion of the streaming networks, it literally opened the floodgates. So kind of piggybacking off what everybody said, allow yourself to build those relationships at those places where the buyers are at so that you can present your material, but you still have to be on point. You can't have your stuff not together. And I can tell you how many people, when I used to do development back in the day, used to come to my office and try to pitch me, and they don't really know their pitch. You got to know your stuff. So you still have to be on point regardless.
So question for you on that. How does one know whether they're on point or not? How are they able to evaluate that? Because I think oftentimes people come and they think that they're ready, and they may not be. So what advice can you give them to ensure that they're ready and they're coming correct?
Well, you know, look, there are different labs as well, you know, that you can kind of workshop your projects. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is also to try to go and get writers, and I'm only speaking with writers right now, not necessarily directors, but, you know, to get writers that are possibly writers who are staffed in the room, or people who are upper level writers, and, you know, to actually look at your stuff, you know. And you might ask, well, how do I get to those people? I mean, and I will tell you that there are a lot of conferences out there that you could go to and actually meet these people and mentor them. The Writers Guild, the PGA does an event every year. There's an event called Scripted that's in LA every year. I mean, there are access. You do have access to these people. Just don't stalk them on social media. That's not cool. Okay? But what I'm saying is that, you know, there are ways to get your work done. Now, another way too also is what's called coverage. Does anybody know what coverage is? Coverage is basically like a grading system for writers. And there are companies that do coverage, and you could go to UTA if you know him, but if you don't, then there are companies online that actually you pay and they will do coverage for you, and you will be able to get the critique that you need. And once you have the coverage, you can actually take that to an agent or a manager or to a buyer, and they will actually probably look at it a little quicker, just because the way that coverage is kind of designed, it really gives you like 4 different grades. And the one that you want is a consider, or a strongly consider, I should say. So that's probably the best way to, you know, find out really how good your project is.
And I think that actually applies for other types of content other than writing. I think it also applies for even stand-up. I think your peers are your resource, and it's good to get a second opinion and sometimes a third opinion, and work with people that you know and trust and are doing the things that you want to do, because then they become qualified. I find that oftentimes people go to people who have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. They're talking to people who have no understanding of the business. So it's really important for you to look at people who are actually doing things, not talking about doing it, but actually doing it, and it's tangible, and those are the types of people that you should solicit advice to, so that when you approach people on the business side, you know that all of your ducks are in a row.
Yeah, you can't let your cousin read it and then expect that to be, because that's not going to work.
Also, I just want to add, obviously talent is not the same as, the agency side, but what a lot of people have found success in is going into, for example, a management company or the agency world and understanding, a lot of people who are trying to do this stuff are so young that they feel like, I had a girl literally 2 days ago, an Indian girl, come up to me and be like, I'm the next Mindy Kaling. And I'm like, all right, but, like, how do we get there? And we're also in an agency and you're someone's assistant. So what's the plan?
Right.
And, what I strongly suggested her to consider is, instead of being terrible at her current job and, writing screenplays and trying to do work on stand-up, like, she's all over the place, gave me anxiety. And I was just like, listen, I was like, sometimes focus on the fight that's right ahead of you, right? Like, if you're doing something in, for example, the agency space, and your boss is somebody who is connected in that space, it goes back to what you were saying with networking. You can still build relationships, you can still talk to people, and at the end of the day, those same people are agents today, managers tomorrow, talent the next day, and you never know who becomes what. But if you're, head down, not looking at the resources around you, and kind of taking the obvious steps, I think sometimes people make it tougher for themselves than it needs to be. And especially being in New York, or if you're in LA, I mean, you guys are at something like this right now, this is the right step. And you find people, and that whole 6 degrees of separation is true, except nowadays it's like 2 people, and you would be surprised. I went from knowing 0 people, like it was pathetic, to try to get into entertainment. And my mom was like, go be a doctor, and I was like, I don't want to do that. And one person at a time, step by step, brick by brick, gets you to where you need to be. And even in the moment, if it takes, God forbid, 18 months, and you're, God forbid, now 23, it's okay, because that's a launching pad for the rest of your life, right?
So if you guys can tell me the one piece of advice that you think would be the most useful for the people in the audience, what would that be? Just one.
I mean, and I guess it kind of covers what everybody else has said, but I can't stress enough how preparation, like really be prepared with your, whether, your pitch or your project or projects, your scripts, like just really take time to prepare it, and don't like take it for granted. Like, don't just be like, oh, I met this person, so they're going to get me in there, and then you're not really ready, because it won't work that way. So just preparation all around as much as you can.
I think part of that, for me, preparation is, kind of just what I was saying, is you got to know what you want in this world, right? No one's going to tell you. People will give you ideas, like I'll tell you to go be a lawyer, and you may be like, I would rather kill myself. And ultimately, you have to know what it is, what you want. Like, I knew I wanted to be in the agency world as a lawyer. I didn't know there was like 3 seats in the whole world for that, but I just knew that that's what I wanted, and I kept going for it. And if somebody said it wasn't possible, it was like, okay, fine, then I'm going to go to somebody else who can show me how it is possible. And I think that's really important, because you're going to meet people every day who are going to remind you that what you're doing is the stupidest thing in the world. And if you really focus on those people, why bother?
And since we kind of been talking about relationships and the strength of them, just a practical example that a mentor of mine gave to me. I went to his office one day, and he had a list of names on the wall, entertainment attorney, some fairly famous clients on there, but some people names I didn't recognize. And it was about 15 names on the piece of paper. And I said, why do you have these names on the wall? And he said, these are people that I want to remind myself to stay in contact with. And he said, because what you'll realize is you may reach out to someone, but they may not have something for you today. But if you build a relationship with them and a rapport, hey, how you doing? This is what's new with me, what's new with you. Eventually something's gonna come across their desk, and they'll say like, oh, hey, I was just talking to Kevin last week. Or I just was talking to Kevin, or I know he's looking for this opportunity. But being able to, like, literally in front of you see those names that you wanna stay in contact with, that'll help you remember, that'll kind of put a roadmap to how you wanna network. And then the interesting thing about the list is I went home, I did the same thing. I started with about 10 names, and then 10 names became 15 names. 15 names became 20 names, became 30 names. And then eventually what you'll find is people actually start reaching out to you first. So it's not you always having the pressure to say like, oh, how do I break the ice? How am I always the first one to start the conversation? And that's how you'll be able to kind of get some of those opportunities.
I think my best advice is that always remember that it's about the work. It's always about the work. And whether you write or direct or you're an actor or a comedian or whatever, you have to be your best at every single time. And if you don't take the time to sacrifice, because I think everybody in here has probably sacrificed something, then you won't really know what the potential is of what you're trying to do. I think the people that work the hardest and stay up the latest and get up the earliest are the people that are really focused and dedicated in this game. And, you know, I've seen writers who were writers' assistants and rose to showrunners and, you know, now have their own shows. And they were extremely razor sharp, focused, and dedicated, stayed extra, stayed late in the room, asking the showrunner for help and for what can I do more? What do you need? You know, or, you know, being at, you know, writing your scripts for the film festivals and making sure that you are making the best product. You know, it's just, it's always about the work. And if you always stay focused on that, then personalities and other things aren't going to ever matter, because your work is always going to be your best resume. And people are going to see your work and they're going to want to work with you. So it doesn't matter if they don't want to work with you now, keep your focus on the work.
And I'd like to add that training is important. It's like a muscle. So if you want to be a writer, you have to always write. If you want to do stand-up, you need to stay on stage. If you want to act, then you should always be acting. And you shouldn't be waiting for someone to give you an opportunity. You should be figuring out ways to make those opportunities for yourself. And so as long as you keep that muscle going and you're constantly training, when the opportunities do come, then you're going to always be ready for those opportunities. And that being said, I'm going to open it up to you guys if you have any questions.
What is coverage? Is that a website we go to? I've never heard anything like that.
Yeah, so coverage, like I was saying before, is a grading system that the studios and the networks use to evaluate a script, and agencies also. So when you usually submit your project to an agent and they like the pitch and you, let's say, write a script, then they'll take it and they'll have readers read it and they'll actually grade the script. It's usually like about 5 or 6 pages, and it gives you, there's a grading system that is.
I understand that, but
yeah, you saying how do you get it?
I don't know what it is. I know how it works. You explain that, but
Right.
How do I access it?
Oh yeah, if you Google script coverage,
Okay, script
then
coverage. Thank you.
and you can get them. There's like probably like maybe 20 different companies that actually do coverage. All right.
Any other questions?
Do I go because I'm here? Yeah? I'm good? Okay. Wait, no?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going. That's it. First of all, thank you for all the words of wisdom. So my question is, as someone who's currently like cooking up like a pitch for like a show or something, I worry about telling people because I'm worried my idea might get stolen, or like someone who has the resources will take it and do something with it. So like, how do I like protect my content while soliciting help from people?
I think that's a great question. So depending on the type of work, is it a written?
Like like a TV show.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, so I think a good thing would be for you to register it with the WGA.
Let me write it down.
And I think the other thing I would like to say is a lot of times people think that an idea is just a couple of words or a couple of pages. That's not really an idea. I think in order to create a show, there's a lot that goes into it. So if you were concerned about someone, again, stealing your IP, you could register it. But I think it's tricky because I feel like a lot of people say this and I'm like, no one is stealing your idea, but it does happen.
Yes.
So I would say to be safe to register with the WGA.
Cool. Thank you. Oh,
And I would add too, and also obviously copywriting the work, and also non-disclosure agreements. You're obviously going to have a certain level of conversation with that person, but obviously you're holding back a little bit because you don't want to give them everything. But once you start getting into deeper talks, you can definitely have the person on the other side sign that non-disclosure agreement.
I like that. Thank you.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Okay, so this question is one for representing all the artists, all the talent in here. So let's just say you're talent. You may be freelancing with an agent, or maybe you are signed to an agent. Maybe you've been with them for a little bit of time. But what would you say is, or I would say maybe some of the red flags that you would see if you're thinking, maybe I should look for new representation, or maybe I should find a manager because my agent seems to be sitting on their hands. I am going in for things, but there's other things that I see on that wonderful website, castingabout.com, if you guys don't know, that I'm not going in for. Why is that? So what would you say are the red flags for you to say, okay, maybe I should find new representation, being talent?
I mean, this is being recorded, right? So this is going to get back to my agency and I'm going to get fired. But, I think it goes back to what we were talking about with the whole DIY aspect. If your agent isn't doing anything for you, you don't have to wait for him to call or her to call you. There's still, to your point, there's ways to get out there and stay out there. And at the end of the day, if you're able to get something, you don't have to give any commission to that person, right? Because they didn't do anything for you. I was about to curse. They didn't do anything for you. So, you have to remind yourself of your own value, because at the end of the day, the agents provide a value and a service, but it's not what it used to be where they were the gatekeepers, right? Where they were the only ones that had any access to information. So, the obvious red flags are, they don't call you back. They don't give you ideas. They don't, a lot of the best agents that I work with that have clients, whether there's, international superstars or just starting out, they care, and you see it. And it's not, oh man, Monday, 9 o'clock, I can't wait to call you because I have 3 ideas. It's, I'm texting you on a Sunday because I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about, I saw something and I think this would be great for you. So I think in today's world, it's very easy to see a bad agent out there because you'll see that they just sit on their hands, and if the phone rings for them, then they call you to be like, hey, this just came up. And even though the agency space is consolidating left, right, and center, and there's fewer agencies than there've ever been, that doesn't mean that there aren't hungry people out there that want to do good work for you. And I keep reminding people that, there are a lot of diverse people out there on the talent side, but you can't forget there's also diverse, talented agents out there. And a lot of, for example, female agents, and they're looking for their shot, right? They're looking to find that talented person who will help them rise in the ranks, and they can help that person rise. So I think if you keep the DIY approach open, you'll meet people, and inevitably you'll bump into the people who care about what you're trying to do as much as you do. And it happens easier than you think. I know it just seems like a fortune cookie statement, but it really does matter to be out there, and then you bump into the right people. Don't wait for someone to call you because they have something.
Yeah, and it's also, an agent told me one time the reason why they get 10% and you get 90% is because you're supposed to do 90% of the work. And that's their philosophy. So when you think about that 90%, it could be going to film festivals, networking. It could also be submitting yourself on casting networks. There's a lot of things that you can do on your own, even if your agent isn't working for you. And then when you find the right match, after you've gotten enough bookings, after you've allowed yourself to get the exposure to create a reel, then you can go back to an agent and say, well, this is what I've done on my own. What can you still do for me to help take this to the next level?
That's when you watch an agent sweat. They don't know what to do.
And I think it's important for you to have open dialogue, because sometimes you may think they're not doing something, but you don't really know until you ask them the question. And if you're working with them, it's important for you to have that open dialogue with them and ask them, what is it that you're doing? And tell them, these are the things that you want. And when it comes to like on-camera opportunities, if they are submitting you for things, they should be able to provide you with a report of all the things they submitted you for. So you know that they've submitted you for X, Y, and Z, and if you're not getting called in, maybe you need to work on your materials. Maybe your resume is not strong enough. Maybe your reel is not strong enough, and you can have that conversation so that you guys can work together so that you are able to get in those rooms.
And also, just real quick to add one thing is, you know, now because a lot of cross collaboration happens, if a lot of you are out there trying to be on TV, but let's say you know somebody in the music space, or let's say you know someone who's in the digital space and you want to be, I don't know, you want a podcast, whatever the case may be, the connections are there. So if you know someone in a tangential industry, still pick that person's brain. You never know who that person can connect you with, who's more helpful than someone who should be working for you but hasn't returned your calls in months, you know?
I'll take one last question.
Hi, thank you so much. Hi.
You know what? You skipped it, but because you did that, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to give it to you. You got it.
Being proactive. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you being here. So I'm a writer. I'm also a producer of a live comedy show based in Philly called Tokens R Us. And so as I'm building and doing the work, I feel like I'm getting ready to pitch. But I wanted to know, what are those essential ingredients that should be in your pitch, and what are those materials that you should either bring to the meeting or leave after the meeting?
I'll let you handle that one.
Oh, goodness. I mean, you know, it's hard to really pinpoint it without knowing what you're doing. I mean, you know a good pitch when you hear one. Like, there is no rhyme or reason. It should be something new and exciting and unique, and you know, you should know like exactly who you're targeting, and you know what you want the person listening to it to feel. What they want to extract out of it. You know your audience too, know who you're pitching to. So that you can just get the best out of your pitches. There really is no rhyme or reason, and it really depends on who you're pitching to, I think.
So really it's about knowing who you're pitching to and kind of tailoring it to them?
Well, no. I mean, you know, your pitch is your pitch, and whatever your project is that you want to, you know, you should do that. But just, you know, whether it's kind of a long pitch or a shorter pitch, or just, you know, it depends on who you're pitching to in the room. I mean, do you have representation, for example, at all? You don't? Okay. So... yeah, I mean, it would be pitching as well as having like written material. You know, I don't know, how else can you?
I mean, I think your pitch should be unique. It should be compelling. It should give a good overview of what it is that you're trying to sell. It should, and the thing with pitches, if you're fortunate enough to get into the room, that's your opportunity to sell the pitch. Okay. But oftentimes when you're in the room, those aren't the people that are making the final decisions. So whatever written materials you give them, it needs to serve the purpose of sort of being your surrogate, since you're not going to be in the room with them. And I think it's helpful for you to look at other pitch examples just so you have an idea of the format, and it doesn't look like it's unprofessional. And Google is your friend. There's so many things that you can find online that you should be able to just literally do a Google search and find different formats and find different components so that you can create a compelling pitch depending on what it is that you're trying to pitch. Okay.
I think when I do a pitch myself, I usually, like I don't know what you're pitching, what type of show it is, but you know, you can talk about the characters, you can talk about the stories, you can talk about the journey of the characters. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can kind of, the anatomy of your pitch. However, I don't leave anything behind usually unless I really know them. You know what I mean? I usually, if I know the person and they want something, then I usually try to email it to them. Okay. So I have a record of the transaction. So, but, you know, I would say, you know, the key to your pitch is really knowing your story, you know. And I can tell you that people, when they get in the room, sometimes they just fall apart because they're nervous, and that's fine. It's definitely be nervous, but I think part of it is to take advantage of that time that you're with them and really give them the elevator. Say, my story is this, it's this meets this, this is what I'm trying to do, and you know, this is the way I see the story, and you know, really make it unique so that you're probably the only person that could ever do that story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're just like, well, we have to work with her because she's the only one that could come up with this. So.
And it's okay to also like give examples of like a something that's been proven, like a particular show or whatever, and say it's this meets that, it's Friends meets I don't know, you know. So it's perfectly okay to do that because then that kind of puts it into context for a lot of people.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.